Hey, I'm Cassidy. I am the product manager for Feature Quilts at Kimberbell. Today we're going to do a tutorial for the Mailbox Block in A Quilty Little Christmas, and we'll be showing how to do block by block quilting. So let's get started. We're going to start by loading the files in our machine. And I'm just going to go over this because you have to layer two files on top of each other. You can do it one at a time, but it's nice to be able to do this technique because then you don't have to stop. It will just roll through from one file to the next. So, without any further ado, let's get started. I'm going to load my files into my machine. Here you can see kind of the fun projects I've been working on. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my quilting file. I'm going to set it in my machine, and then I'm going to add another file, and I'm going to put in my mailbox, both 5x7. I'm going to set that. Okay. I'm going to hit embroidery, and here they are overlapped on top. Now, some machines work differently where they will start with different files. So one thing you want to double check is that your files uploaded in the right order. So I'm going to my machine steps here and just checking that we're starting with our background quilting and then it's moving into my block design. So here we've got our first couple of steps. That looks like I've got my batting placement line. And there's my background quilting. Then it will move into the design for my mailbox. That's the order we want to go into. So with that being said, let's get started. Starting with our background quilting. So I've hooped my stabilizer. We're going to use a light mesh cutaway for this block, and I am ready to go. I have all of my fabrics prepared already with fusible backing on the back, just so they hold their form and color. And I also, while we're here, I'm going to feature a few things that you can get along with your design. We have a beautiful needle minder that is available. And it comes with a design that comes directly with A Quilty Little Christmas. I believe this is one of our stamp blocks, and it is beautiful. I don't know if the camera is picking up the shine, but you definitely don't want to miss out on this. It's also a large size, which I like better, so as you're putting your needles away, it's easy to find on your quilt. We also offer a thread kit, and I would highly recommend purchasing a thread kit at your local quilt shop, or we have them available on Kimberbell.com. I would recommend this one specifically because there are so many different hues of green in Quilty Little Christmas, and you want to make sure that they're matching just right, and it's hard to have this much diversity of green that works perfectly just at home. It's nice to have it on hand, ready to go, and the exact color you need. One thing that I do if I have a non-visible thread color is I like to skip down and choose the next thread that we're going to be using. And also because we're going to be on camera today, I want you to be able to see the stitch lines that I'm doing. So we're going to be using a pink lemonade that we'll be using later for the quilting color. So you'll see that my machine just went once across. Usually that means that we're doing a placement line. So right here we have our batting placement line. I'm going to take my hoop out and I'm going to place my batting down onto the hoop. One nice thing about batting is it's usually not too slippery, but if you want to be safe, you can tape it down just to make sure it's not sliding away from you. It's no fun to have to unpick things. And we're going to do our batting tack down line. You'll notice that the machine is going over twice to tack that batting down well. Okay, my next step is to remove the hoop from the machine, and I'm going to trim that batting. Also remove the tape. And I've talked about this before in past tutorials, but when I trim, of course you want to keep the tensioning in your hoop. You don't want to pull the stabilizer. But as I'm cutting, the fabric or the batting that I'm cutting away, I kind of like to pull it out of my way and have a little bit of tension there. I just feel like it helps me get a clean, close line. And obviously, you don't want to be cutting your tack down line. If you do, it's not the end of the world, but you just want to get as close as possible without cutting your thread. And here you can see I cut my thread a little bit. Just make sure that you don't wiggle it too much or have any other clips too bad that it's moving away, and you should be okay. The quilting will go over the top and place that batting down just fine. And the rest of the tack down should stabilize it okay. Okay, so I'm going to put it back into the machine now that I've trimmed it away. And I'm going to do my fabric placement line. Now that I've finished with that fabric placement line, I'm going to take my background fabric, I'm going to place it into the hoop, and I'm going to tape it down. As you can see, especially, I know that sometimes it's nice to be sparing with fusible backing, but especially for these white fabrics, it's really nice. It just kind of provides extra support, and it makes sure that everything isn't too transparent, that we're not seeing stitches underneath or anything crazy underneath the fabric. And white can be super see-through. We're just going to tack that fabric down. Now when we're quilting the actual block, it will only go over once. And the reason why is because those are going to be our cut lines. We're going to cut when we cut the final block over that line. So that is actually not a final stitch for the design. And the nice part about just doing that quick top stitch is that you're able to remove it pretty quickly. It frays away, rather than if we did a double stitch. It's kind of, when it's along the edge that you cut, it's a little bit more tricky to peel it out versus just when the machine goes over it once. So you'll notice that when it was tacking down that background fabric, the machine only went over it once. The reason why is because when we trim the block, these are actually our cut lines that we're going to be trimming the block along. And so these aren't going to be final stitches that we're going to see or that are going to help the overall integrity of the block. In the end, they're just kind of a measurement so you know where the block is, what size it's supposed to be. And the nice thing about it just being one stitch that hasn't been double tacked down is that when you cut, you'll be able to pull that thread away really easily. All right, so now that we've tack down that background fabric, I'm going to load it back into the machine, and we're going to do the quilting. I love watching the machine do background quilting. It's just very peaceful. You watch it kind of get into a flow and just watch a design appear before your eyes. The artists at Kimberbell who do the background quilting, they do a beautiful job. And I love this block specifically, this quilting design specifically, because the whole design was themed off of holiday mail. And this is the quilting design that ties both themes together. We have some quilting blocks that are just stamp shaped, and then we have others that are Christmas themed, and this one's a little bit of both. It's both mail and Christmas themed. So yeah, it's kind of our design that glues both themes together. And when we were testing quilting colors, I love the conclusion we came to with doing this lemonade pink for the quilting. It interestingly blends really well with that pink and green plaid underneath. It still shows, but it blends nicely. You can see it there. It's not like it would be with the linen where it just blends in, but it doesn't compete with the design on top. Okay, and since I overlapped my files, we're right into the block design. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to do the placement line for the bottom of the mailbox, kind of the mailbox stand. And I'm going to check my thread colors. My next color is going to be a Totem Green, and that will show really well over the background quilting that I have. So I'm going to jump ahead and switch to that Totem Green. These next few steps are all just going to be in non-visible thread color. If you do worry about threads showing through your fabrics or anything like that, you can obviously switch to a white color or something like that, but we just want to do something that's visible on camera. And this Totem Green is one of my favorites. It's just this really deep emerald. It's the darkest green that we offer in the thread kit, and it just goes really well with some of the red hues. It looks very Christmassy. All right, we're gonna do that placement line. Okay, I'm going to remove the hoop, and I am going to place my first fabric down, fabric number 5, and that's just a 2.5 by 2 inch piece. It's pieces like this that make me terrified to throw out any of my fabric or any of my scraps, because, you know, I'm like, I will find a use for it. There is a need for teeny pieces. And then it takes up space in storage, and my husband gets mad at me, and it's a good time. Gonna remove it now that fabric has been tacked down. And as you can see, I really lucked out. I just barely kind of caught the edge of that tape, but it's just gonna peel right away. If you do catch your tape in your stitches, it's not a crazy big deal. Just remove it slowly. Maybe use your scissors to help. And there we are. Not perfectly centered, but it's over where it matters. All right, when using applique, there are a bunch of different scissors that you can use and that Kimberbell offers. And I'm going to be using two mainly today. I really like these curved scissors, and Kimberbell is going to be releasing their own version of these. And I was testing the prototypes with Katie, our PM over tools, and I'm telling you, they are nice. They clip very final and very concise. But anyways, I'm going to get into the details and kind of get a few things out of the way. Then I personally, oh, didn't catch my fusible backing with that snip, like to use these smaller snips to get into fine detail. So if it's going to be a lot of curves that are small, these are your friend. We also offer SVG files, so if you would like to trim that way, by all means, those are available. All right, and because I'm going to be doing a longer cut here and I want it to be straight, I'm switching shears. And there we are, pretty close. And now this isn't raw edge because we're going to be doing a satin stitch over the top. And it is the worst when you don't cut close on and a satin stitch goes over and the fabric catches in it. So if you get close to that thread line, that shouldn't be a problem. But the next machine step that we're going to be doing is not the satin stitch, believe it or not. We're actually going to place our mailbox, the main body of the mailbox first. So you're going to see that, and it's going to come back later and do my satin stitch. All right, I'm going to pull my hoop from the machine. Lots of back and forth with the machine and pulling the hoop in and out. Lots of applique. That's kind of what happens when you're doing applique. So just make sure that your hoop is really tight and your stabilizer isn't wiggly underneath. I always like to double check whenever I'm doing any project, but especially with ones where you're doing a lot of applique. That's important. Okay, this is going to look a little scary for a minute because we're doing Totem Green over the red, but that stitch line, that tack down line that tacks down the fabric, it's not going to show. I'm going to have a satin stitch later in the correct color that's going to cover it up. And you can always double check your instructions, just make sure that what you're stitching isn't going to show and your thread colors are correct on the right step. All right, I'm going to remove it from the hoop, remove the tape, and since there are no intricate curves or anything, it's mostly just straight long lines, I'm just going to use my larger shears for this. I'm just going to pull it away. This one will also be finished with a satin stitch, so the edge of my fabric doesn't really matter if it's a little bit jagged here, just as long as there's not a lot hanging out that can get caught in the stitches. We're going to put it back down, and we're going to do another placement line, and this is going to be for the background of the mailbox pocket. And I'm just dusting it off a little bit. As you cut, you kind of get different threads. And it's actually important to dust it off. I've put my background fabric, it's kind of in this white color. I put fusible backing on it, but still just as an extra precaution, just make sure that nothing is showing underneath. At Kimberbell, all of our testers have lint rollers, and I am telling you, they come in handy on projects like this. Okay. All right, so now that I've got the background fabric tacked down, I'm going to trim around the edges. And just to be safe, I'm going to trim those a little bit closer. They're probably fine. I'm just being a little meticulous about it. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do our pocket placement line. Okay, so the pocket placement line, it's a little bit hard to see, but it just went over this edge. What we're going to do is to finish the top of the pocket is we're going to fold our fabric in half. You can press this if you want a very nice crease, or if you want to finger press like I am, you can do that as well. And you can see these two tick marks. We're going to make sure that our fold covers the clearance for that placement line and that our fold lines up with those tick marks. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to tape it down. And if you finger pressed like I did, I would definitely make sure you tape it down good and tight so that that crease looks sharp. So I'm just kind of keeping that pressed and tight while I'm taping with my left hand, pressing it down, and that should be good. Okay, so I've taped the edges, and the instructions, it only has tape on these sides, and we are not going to tape the top. The way the machine is going to move, it's not going to catch. All right, I'm going to remove the hoop. Remove the tape and trim it down using my larger scissors. All right, and there is our pocket. It's going to be finished with a satin stitch, but we're going to do a little sneak peek at some of the things offered in the embellishment kit. We actually custom fit the molds for these buttons so that when you place your envelope into the pocket, it'll fit perfectly. You can hide it or you can tuck it in and have it peek out. So that's kind of fun. All right, the next step, and this is the whole reason that we were doing all our tack down lines in Totem Green, we are going to do a satin stitch for the stand for the mailbox. We're going to do a thread change to Wildflower really quick to do the satin stitch over the body of the mailbox. All right, now we're going to switch back to Totem Green for the roof. And one thing, you may already know this, but when you're changing out threads, you always want to cut from the top and then you want to pull from the bottom. And the reason for that is if you pull from the top, you can mess with the tensioning of your machine. It just keeps your machine lasting longer. It's a good rule of thumb to stick to. I'm not always perfect at it, but It's something we stress a lot up on the testing floor at Kimberbell, just to make sure that our machines are running smooth. All right, I'm going to switch out my thread again, clipping the top and pulling from the bottom with the thread removal. And I'm going to do our last satin stitch, which will be in Pink Lemonade, and that'll just do the outline of the mailbox, just kind of around this pocket here. And these blocks were interesting, especially when we were choosing the thread colors and how we were going to color block all the different designs. Sometimes when you place pink, it might seem a little out of place on the individual block, but I promise it all ties together when you see it on the overall design. As you can see, it's applying extra tacks over where the pocket is, just making sure that the machine goes over and makes all of those stitches smooth, doesn't catch on anything. The digitizers and testers work really hard at Kimberbell to make sure that the way your machine is passing over the design is as smooth as possible. All right, our last machine step, we're going to put the letters on the mailbox. Not the envelope letters, but the Dear Santa letters in quotations written out in calligraphy. All right, that was our last machine step. We are officially done with the block as far as sewing it goes. I'm going to remove my tape. And one thing I like to do before I unhoop my design is I like to go through and trim all the little stray threads. We offer these really cute needle nose tweezers to be able to get in there and get those small corners there, but so you can kind of go in. They're sharp, so the needle nose tweezers should be able to just peel it back if you want to just use your tweezers. I like to go in with snips to just kind of get in closer. I feel more comfortable doing that, like I'm gonna get more of the thread that way, but to each their own. We're going to trim it down. Our next steps for these blocks is to remove it from the hoop. We will be adding a bow right here from the embellishment kit, and it kind of ties in that pink nicely. And then we will trim it using our orange pop rulers along this trim line. And there's your block. Thank you for joining me for this tutorial. We appreciate all of the love and support from followers. If you're new here, please like and subscribe.